Welcome the Lord's chosen. The moment you truly understand what's going on, you don't argue, you don't protest, you don't announce your exit. You quietly grab your bag and disappear. Here's the part nobody warns you about. Real awareness doesn't make you louder. It makes you allergic to nonsense. Once the dots connect, once the patterns stop looking random and start looking designed, something inside you clicks off. You're no longer confused. You're no longer shocked. You're just done. Not in a dramatic, flipping tables way. More like a calm internal resignation that says, yeah, I've seen enough. There's an actual psychological fact behind this, by the way. Studies on cognitive clarity show that the more a person understands the underlying mechanics of a system, the less likely they are to engage emotionally with it. Translation: when you truly know what's happening, you stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop performing for people who were never listening to understand you in the first place. You don't storm out. You exit like someone who already read the ending and didn't like the plot. And let's be honest, explaining yourself is exhausting. It's like giving a PowerPoint presentation to people who already decided they don't like the conclusion. You realize most conversations aren't about truth. They're about comfort, about keeping things familiar, about making sure nobody feels exposed by your awareness. So instead of giving a farewell speech, you give silence. Not the poetic kind people romanticize, the practical kind. The kind that packs its things neatly and leaves no forwarding address. There's even a bit of dark humor in it, because once you know, you can't unknow. You'll sit there nodding while someone confidently explains something completely wrong, and all you can think is, wow, this used to stress me out. That's when you understand the real shift has already happened. You didn't leave yet, but mentally you checked out a long time ago. This is the point where people mistake your calm for coldness, your distance for arrogance, and your absence for mystery. But the truth is simpler and sharper than that. When you know everything, staying would require pretending you don't. And at that stage, leaving without explanation isn't rude. It's honest. Number 1, knowing everything destroys your tolerance for performative reality. When you truly see the mechanics behind people's actions, the layers they hide behind, and the roles they insist on playing, the whole world starts to feel like a stage. And not in a fun, theatrical way, but in a heavy, exhausting way. You realize that most interactions are scripted, rehearsed, or at least filtered to suit someone's agenda, ego, or fear. People aren't showing you who they are. They're showing you the version of themselves they want you to believe in. The fake smiles, the carefully chosen words, the over-exaggerated emotions. They all start to look like masks. And when you see the masks clearly, your patience for them disappears. You stop nodding along. You stop pretending to be impressed. You stop giving energy to what isn't real. It's not cynicism. It's clarity. When you know everything, you no longer have the luxury of believing in facades. You notice the tiny inconsistencies, the subtle manipulations, the little performances people pull off to protect themselves or gain something. It's everywhere, not just in relationships, but in workplaces, social groups, and even family dynamics. Every conversation, every gesture, every compliment or criticism carries weight because you understand the underlying motives. And suddenly the world feels simultaneously smaller and heavier. Smaller because you've cut through illusions. Heavier because the illusions were what made the world feel comfortable before. This awareness doesn't just make you quieter, it makes you selective. You no longer attend every gathering, respond to every message, or weigh in on every debate. You save your presence for spaces that require authenticity, because you can feel how exhausting it is to be surrounded by performances that demand energy, attention, or empathy that's never reciprocated. Staying in these spaces feels like participating in a play you didn't audition for and don't enjoy. The more you know, the less patience you have for the pretense, and the easier it becomes to walk away silently, leaving others performing their roles in the empty theater while you step into clarity. This is why knowing everything often leads to leaving without explanation. It's not anger, it's not pride. It's simply a refusal to participate in illusions, a refusal to waste presence on anything that isn't real. Once you see through the performance, silence and absence become more honest than words ever could. Number 2, full awareness makes excuses unbearable. Once you truly understand how the world works and why people act the way they do, excuses stop landing. You see through them instantly, not because you're harsh or judgmental, but because your perception has sharpened beyond the comforting fog of naivety. People often hide behind explanations, claiming circumstances, misunderstandings, or reasons for their actions. At first, you might have empathized or given them the benefit of the doubt, but knowledge changes that. Once you know everything, you recognize which excuses are genuine and which are self-serving illusions meant to justify laziness, avoidance, or deception. The ones that are excuses no longer feel tolerable, they feel exhausting. You start to notice patterns, recurring behaviors that are disguised as mistakes or unavoidable mishaps. When someone consistently blames situations, systems, or other people, it stops being a story of struggle and becomes a story of choice. Awareness strips away the sympathy cushions. You begin to understand that most people aren't failing because they can't. They're failing because they won't. And that recognition hits harder than any confrontation because it's quiet, internal, and irreversible. You can't unsee it. This clarity shifts your energy radically. You stop offering advice, encouragement, or explanations to people who continuously hide behind excuses. You don't yell or argue, you just disengage. Staying invested in someone else's constant rationalizations becomes pointless, even toxic. You realize that tolerating excuses is a slow surrender of your own time, energy, and peace. It's like carrying weight you don't need to carry while the person making excuses never lifts a finger. Full awareness teaches that boundaries aren't just helpful, they're essential. Eventually, you become selective about where and with whom you spend your energy. You save your presence for people willing to act, grow, and own their truth. Excuses no longer invite conversation. They invite detachment. And detachment becomes a shield, protecting you from the frustration and disappointment that comes from watching someone insist on remaining small when they already know better. In this state of clarity, patience runs thin, tolerance fades, and leaving without explanation starts to feel not only justified, but necessary. Number 3, you realize explanations are rarely about clarity, they're about control. When you know everything, you begin to notice a simple truth that most people never admit. Asking why is rarely about understanding. Most of the time, when someone wants an explanation, they're not looking for clarity. They're looking for leverage. They want to categorize you, label you, or bend your choices into a frame that makes them feel comfortable. They want to reduce your complexity so it fits into their narrative, so they can control how they perceive you and, indirectly, control your behavior. Once you see this, the act of explaining becomes not just pointless, it's a trap. Every word you give, every justification, is a piece of ammunition for them to manipulate or judge. You start noticing it everywhere. In relationships, a partner asks, "Why did you do that?" And instead of seeking understanding, they're evaluating whether they like the answer enough to continue feeling safe around you. At work, a colleague presses for reasons, not because they care about your reasoning, but because they want to frame it in a way that maintains their authority. Even friends, family, or casual acquaintances ask questions under the guise of curiosity. But the real motive is to fit your truth into a story they can control. Once you recognize this, explaining becomes exhausting, unnecessary, and ultimately dishonest to yourself. Awareness changes your approach completely. You stop handing over your power through explanations. You stop trying to justify decisions to people who are not equipped or willing to receive your truth. Silence becomes a tool, a protective shield that preserves your energy, your autonomy, and your clarity. Walking away without explanation is not about arrogance. It's about refusing to participate in someone else's need to control your narrative. The shift is subtle but profound. You begin to understand that clarity doesn't require validation from others. Truth is not dependent on anyone else agreeing, comprehending, or even witnessing it. And the moment you internalize that, you stop explaining, stop defending, and stop performing. Your presence or absence speaks louder than any words ever could. Leaving quietly becomes the purest form of honesty, because it's grounded in the reality that some people are not asking why to understand. They're asking to dominate, and you refuse to give them that power. Number 4, full awareness exposes how conditional belonging really is. Once you truly understand the world, you start to see that belonging is rarely unconditional. People love, accept, and include others based on convenience, perception, or the benefit they gain. Loyalty often comes with invisible contracts, whether spoken or unspoken. You notice how quickly admiration evaporates when someone no longer fits a preferred narrative or stops performing according to expectations. You realize that the warmth, smiles, and praise that once felt comforting were often dependent on conditions you didn't fully recognize. That realization is quiet, but it lands like a hammer, because it forces you to confront the simple, harsh truth. Most people's attachment to you is transactional. This awareness changes everything. You stop interpreting judgment, criticism, or silence as personal attacks. You see them as signals, indicators of what people value and what they're willing to tolerate. You understand why some friends drift when you grow, why colleagues frown when you refuse to play politics, why even family can become distant when you no longer fit the role they imagined. It's not about rejection, it's about alignment. And once you see the boundaries of conditional belonging, it becomes almost impossible to participate in the same way again without feeling your energy drain. You also start protecting yourself instinctively. You stop trying to force inclusion where it doesn't naturally exist. You stop bending to prove worthiness to people who never truly cared about the person you are beneath the surface. The bonds that once felt vital now feel performative, and you realize that staying to meet expectations that were never yours is a betrayal of self. Leaving or stepping back without explanation becomes a natural, almost inevitable choice. The beauty of this awareness is that it brings clarity, not bitterness. You learn to seek spaces where presence is valued for authenticity, not performance. You understand that true belonging is rare and precious, and everything else is energy wasted. Full awareness doesn't just reveal the conditions people place on connection. It teaches you that walking away silently is often the most honest, peaceful, and powerful way to honor both yourself and the truth of the relationships around you. Number 5. You see that staying would require self-betrayal. When you truly understand the dynamics around you, staying in certain spaces starts to feel like wearing a costume that doesn't fit. Every smile, every word, every gesture becomes a test of how much of yourself you're willing to hide or compromise. You notice the little things first, the subtle pressure to conform, the expectation to minimize your knowledge, the quiet insistence that you stay small so others feel comfortable. At first it seems manageable, like a compromise for harmony. But the longer you remain, the more you feel pieces of yourself slipping away. The awareness of this erosion is sharp and unavoidable. Self-betrayal doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It creeps in quietly, in the moments you suppress a truth to avoid conflict, in the times you pretend ignorance to maintain peace, in the small agreements you make just to stay accepted. Each of these little concessions is a thread unraveling from the fabric of your integrity. When you know everything, when you see the patterns, it becomes impossible to ignore that staying under these conditions is not loyalty, not patience, and not sacrifice. It is self-betrayal. You are asking yourself to shrink, and that goes against everything clarity has taught you about who you are and what you deserve. This realization changes the way you measure presence and energy. You no longer feel obligated to stay simply because leaving would upset someone or because tradition demands it. You understand that the cost of staying outweighs any benefit. And the more aware you become, the clearer it is that silence and departure are forms of preservation. Walking away is not a failure. It is a reclamation of what was being quietly demanded from you all along: authenticity, autonomy, and integrity. The power in this awareness is transformative. You don't leave with anger, drama, or speeches. You leave quietly, firmly, and without apology, because no explanation can justify staying in a situation that asks you to betray yourself. Knowing when to walk away becomes a skill of self-respect, a boundary that cannot be negotiated. Leaving without explanation is not evasive. It is the purest statement of alignment and the most honest declaration that your life, time, and presence will never be spent shrinking for anyone again. Number 6. Awareness teaches you that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. When you reach a level of clarity, where you understand motives, intentions, and hidden patterns, you start protecting your inner life instinctively. You realize that not everyone who asks for your thoughts, feelings, or plans deserves them. Some people will use your vulnerability as leverage. Some will twist your honesty into weapons, and some simply won't handle the weight of your truth. Awareness makes you selective, because once you know everything, you understand that your energy and insight are valuable. They aren't casual gifts to hand out. They are tools, power, and pieces of your essence that need to be shared wisely. You begin noticing the subtle signs, the ones who nod but never act, the ones who pretend to listen but are collecting information, the ones who ask questions out of curiosity but with hidden judgment. Every interaction becomes a filter. The awareness is almost instinctual. You no longer need to think about who deserves access. You feel it. This selectivity isn't coldness. It's a survival skill, a way of ensuring that your presence and your knowledge aren't exploited. You start to understand that openness is a privilege, not a default setting, and giving it indiscriminately invites chaos, manipulation, or misunderstanding. This understanding changes how you engage with the world. You stop explaining, stop justifying, and stop exposing yourself to scrutiny that doesn't matter. You save your time, energy, and honesty for those who can match it, for spaces that are worthy of your presence. You stop performing emotional labor for people who will never reciprocate. And you find that your silence, your boundaries, and your careful sharing create a kind of magnetic respect that words could never achieve. Ultimately, this level of awareness teaches the power of selective presence. Not everyone deserves to see your depth, your strategy, or your truth. Protecting your inner world is not arrogance, it is intelligence. Leaving without explanation becomes a natural extension of this principle. When you know everything, you recognize that walking away from those unworthy of your essence is the clearest, strongest, and most honest act of all. It's a quiet but undeniable declaration that your life, your energy, and your mind are not open for negotiation. Number 7. You recognize that most conflicts are rituals, not problems. When you reach a level of awareness where patterns become impossible to ignore, you start seeing that most fights, arguments, and tensions aren't about the issues people claim. They are rituals, repetitive cycles that exist to keep people comfortable, to reinforce old dynamics, or to replay familiar emotions. These conflicts aren't designed to be solved. They are designed to be performed. Once you see this, it becomes almost absurd how much energy is wasted on drama that never had any intention of reaching resolution. People aren't seeking solutions. They are seeking familiarity, validation, and control. The recognition hits you quietly but sharply. The chaos around you isn't personal. It's habitual. This realization changes your perspective entirely. You stop entering battles with the expectation of change because you understand the rules are pre-written. You notice the patterns, the way someone always provokes, the way another reacts, the same apologies or excuses recycled over months or years. Awareness turns what used to feel like tension into a kind of theater, where each player is performing a role they have practiced their entire life. It's exhausting, but liberating. You no longer need to invest your energy in trying to fix the unfixable. You stop getting drawn into the emotional loops that once consumed you. The power in this understanding is subtle but profound. You begin to step back without making it obvious. You disengage from arguments that serve no purpose other than to perpetuate ritual. You allow the performances to unfold around you, while you preserve your clarity, your peace, and your direction. Silence, distance, and observation replace debate, defense, and explanation. Leaving without explanation becomes the natural extension of this awareness. You understand that stepping away is not avoidance, it's mastery. It's refusing to participate in patterns that were never meant to be productive. In the end, recognizing conflicts as rituals allows you to rise above repetition without resentment. You conserve your energy for matters that are real, urgent, and worthy. Walking away quietly becomes the ultimate act of wisdom, a way of saying without words that you are no longer a participant in cycles that never served you. It's a truth so simple, yet so transformative, that once you see it, staying becomes impossible. Number 8. You understand that some environments feed on stagnation. When you reach a certain level of awareness, you start noticing the subtle energy of the spaces around you. Some places, some groups, some people actively feed on keeping things the same. They thrive on repetition, comfort, and predictability. Growth, progress, and clarity make them uncomfortable. You realize that the more you evolve, the more friction you create. Not because you're wrong or aggressive, but simply because change threatens their equilibrium. These environments aren't consciously malicious. They are survival mechanisms. They resist anything that challenges the status quo. And once you see this clearly, it becomes impossible to stay without compromising yourself. You notice it in small ways first. Conversations loop in circles. Ideas are dismissed or ridiculed. Achievements are minimized. There's subtle pressure to conform, to act like you haven't changed, to avoid shining too brightly. It's like swimming against a current that has been carefully constructed over years, calm on the surface but relentless beneath. Awareness makes this friction impossible to ignore. You feel it in your energy, in your focus, in your very drive. Staying becomes exhausting because every step forward is met with resistance designed to maintain stagnation. This realization changes how you measure your presence. You no longer invest time or energy in spaces that resist your growth. You stop arguing, justifying, or trying to explain. You save yourself for environments that align with your evolution, for spaces where progress is welcomed rather than feared. Your awareness becomes your compass, guiding you to where you can thrive instead of where you are tolerated. Leaving quietly, without explanation, becomes not just a choice, but a necessity. It's not about anger or pride. It's about survival and alignment. Walking away preserves your clarity, your energy, and your momentum. You understand that growth cannot coexist with stagnation, and the moment you fully grasp that truth, the decision to leave becomes effortless. Some rooms will never support your rise, and knowing when to exit them is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect you can perform. Number 9. Knowing everything shows you that timing matters more than truth. Once you truly understand the world and the people in it, you realize that truth alone isn't enough. Truth has no magic if it lands at the wrong moment. People can ignore it, misinterpret it, or even punish it. Timing determines impact. Saying the right thing too early can confuse or alarm, while saying it too late can make it irrelevant. Awareness teaches you that clarity isn't about spilling every fact, revealing every insight, or correcting every misconception immediately. It's about understanding the rhythm of life, the readiness of others, and the flow of events, and knowing when your truth will land without being destroyed or twisted. This understanding changes how you approach communication and action. You begin to see when your presence, your insight, or your voice is welcomed, and when it will be resisted. You notice the micro-reactions of people, the shifts in energy, the subtle openings that indicate whether the moment is ripe. Timing becomes less about impatience and more about precision. The more you know, the more you see that rushing to explain or prove yourself is a waste of energy. Some truths are seeds that need the right soil and sunlight to grow, and forcing them into the wrong environment only creates conflict or rejection. It also teaches patience in a radical sense. You no longer feel the need to justify your actions or your knowledge immediately. You step back, observe, and wait. You understand that the right moment amplifies impact, while the wrong one diminishes it, no matter how undeniable the truth is. This is why walking away without explanation can be powerful. Your departure isn't ignorance or avoidance, it's timing. It's letting events, circumstances, or the other person's readiness dictate the impact of your presence. Ultimately, knowing everything reveals that life is less about convincing others and more about aligning your actions with the natural flow of understanding. Timing transforms truth from something that can be ignored into something that resonates. Leaving quietly, stepping aside, or withholding explanation becomes an act of wisdom, because it's not about hiding your knowledge. It's about releasing it when it will matter most. Patience and precision replace urgency, and silence often speaks louder than words ever could. Number 10. You stop mistaking proximity for connection. Once you truly understand the patterns of people and life, you begin to see that being around someone doesn't mean you're with them. Proximity is easy. Connection is rare. You can sit in the same room, attend the same meetings, or share the same experiences with someone and still be miles apart emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Awareness exposes the difference between presence and alignment. You notice who engages with you because they care versus who simply tolerates you because convenience or habit makes it easier. The realization hits hard. Just because someone is near doesn't mean they understand, support, or value you. This understanding changes how you approach relationships. You stop assuming that closeness equals loyalty, intimacy, or understanding. You see the subtle cues of detachment, the distracted eyes, the rehearsed words, the selective attention. These small things, which once went unnoticed, become glaring in the light of clarity. You recognize how often people maintain surface-level proximity to feel safe or to keep you predictable, rather than to genuinely connect. The awareness is both sobering and liberating because it allows you to stop wasting energy on appearances and start investing in depth. You also begin to protect yourself instinctively. You stop forcing closeness where it doesn't exist. You stop explaining, justifying, or overextending to people who are not truly present. You learn to prioritize alignment over accessibility. The relationships that truly matter are those where energy flows mutually, where understanding is natural, and where presence is more than physical. It's intentional. Ultimately, this clarity makes leaving or stepping back far less complicated. When you know that proximity is not connection, detachment becomes a form of self-preservation. You stop trying to fit yourself into rooms where your presence is unrecognized or underappreciated. Walking away silently is not rejection. It is honesty. It is acknowledging that connection cannot be manufactured, and that life is too short to invest time and energy in people who are physically near but emotionally and spiritually absent. In this awareness, absence often communicates more than presence ever could. Number 11. You realize not all bridges are meant to be maintained. When you gain true awareness, you begin to see that some connections in life are temporary by design. Not every relationship, friendship, or alliance is meant to follow you into the next season of your growth. Some people are part of your journey only long enough to teach a lesson, provide perspective, or push you toward clarity. Once you understand this, it becomes impossible to force maintenance of every bridge. The effort to hold on to every connection becomes not a virtue but a burden, a slow drain on energy and focus. Awareness teaches that some bridges are finished, and forcing them only distorts both your path and theirs. This insight changes your perception of endings. You stop feeling guilt or pressure to explain departures or closures. You begin to see that leaving a person, a group, or a chapter isn't rejection, it's recognition. Recognition that the role they played in your life is complete, and that attempting to extend it would require compromise, energy, and a dilution of your presence. You start understanding the difference between nostalgia and necessity. Clinging to people who no longer align with your growth is less about loyalty and more about fear of loss or discomfort with change. True awareness strips that fear away, leaving only clarity about what is necessary and what is over. This clarity also makes walking away intentional. You don't exit in anger, argument, or drama. You step back quietly, preserving respect and dignity for both sides. Maintaining a bridge that no longer serves alignment invites stagnation, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. Awareness teaches that timing, growth, and alignment matter more than appearances or obligation. In the end, realizing that not all bridges are meant to be maintained is liberating. It frees you from unnecessary responsibilities, protects your energy, and creates space for the connections that truly matter. Departures are no longer painful. They are acts of precision and integrity. Leaving without explanation becomes an elegant statement of self-respect, acknowledging that some paths are meant to be crossed once, learned from, and then left behind without regret. It's a quiet, powerful mastery of presence and absence. Number 12. Knowledge frees you from the need to be understood. When you truly know everything, when clarity strips away illusions and exposes motives, patterns, and truths, you stop caring if anyone gets it. Understanding becomes optional, approval irrelevant. You realize that most people interpret through their own filters, their own fears, and their own limitations, and no amount of explanation will change that. Trying to make them see your perspective becomes exhausting, futile, and ultimately unnecessary. Awareness frees you from the invisible chains of needing validation. You stop performing for comprehension because you know that true understanding isn't demanded. It's earned, and not everyone is capable of it. This freedom changes how you interact with the world. Conversations that once carried the weight of persuasion now pass lightly without expectation. You no longer justify your choices. defend your knowledge, or bend your truth to meet someone else's comfort. Silence takes on a new power because it is not absence. It is presence unshaken by judgment. You understand that being understood does not equate to being respected or valued, and that your energy is too precious to invest in a narrative that someone is not ready or willing to receive. It also changes how you see relationships and influence. You notice who attempts to grasp your depth and who merely skims the surface, content with their limited view. The former you honor with attention, the latter you allow to remain in their partial truth without frustration or resentment. Knowledge teaches that frustration only arises when expectation exceeds reality. By letting go of the need to be understood, expectation disappears, and peace replaces tension. Ultimately, this clarity allows you to operate from a place of integrity rather than appeasement. Your decisions, words, and presence no longer hinge on comprehension. They hinge on alignment with your truth. Walking away, stepping back, or remaining silent becomes a natural expression of this principle. Leaving without explanation isn't cold or dismissive. It's a declaration that your awareness, insight, and power exist independently of others' recognition. When you no longer need to be understood, you are free to be entirely yourself, and that freedom is absolute. Number 13. You see that explaining invites negotiation you're no longer open to. When you truly understand everything, you begin to notice a simple but brutal truth. Every time you explain yourself, you invite discussion, debate, and compromise. Even when you're clear and confident, explanations give others a foothold to challenge your decisions, reinterpret your motives, or attempt to bend you to their expectations. Knowledge sharpens your perception of this dynamic. You realize that staying silent is not avoidance, it's protection. It's preserving the integrity of your choices, your energy, and your truth. Once you see how much of your life is quietly negotiated through words, the idea of explaining becomes not just unnecessary, but potentially dangerous to your alignment. This awareness shifts the way you interact with people and situations. You stop offering clarifications that serve no purpose, beyond giving someone the opportunity to manipulate, doubt, or redirect your actions. You stop justifying your decisions because justification is almost always a form of negotiation disguised as conversation. You notice the subtle ways people seize explanations as openings. They probe, they reinterpret, they argue. Every attempt to make sense of your choices carries the risk of dilution, your authority over your own life slipping into someone else's hands. Awareness teaches that some battles are not worth fighting, and some explanations are not worth giving. It also changes how you perceive detachment. Walking away or withholding clarification is not coldness or arrogance. It is mastery. It is a refusal to participate in conversations that would compromise your energy or autonomy. You understand that silence communicates far more than words can, because it establishes boundaries without argument, without persuasion, and without compromise. Ultimately, recognizing that explaining invites negotiation transforms your relationships, your decisions, and your presence. You stop feeling obligated to clarify or justify, and in that space, power returns. Leaving without explanation becomes a statement of alignment, a quiet declaration that your life, your choices, and your truth are not up for debate. It's not just leaving, it's leaving as the person fully in command of themselves, untouched by expectation or manipulation. Number 14, knowing everything makes departure inevitable, not dramatic. When you reach a level of awareness where patterns, motives, and truths are fully visible, leaving is no longer a decision, it's a certainty. Departure isn't about making noise, proving a point, or seeking validation. It's quiet, inevitable, and precise. You understand that your presence in certain spaces among certain people is no longer aligned with your growth, your clarity, or your energy. Staying would require compromise, pretension, or self-betrayal. Awareness removes hesitation, leaving only the calm knowledge that walking away is the only honest choice. There's no need for speeches, confrontations, or explanations, because your truth doesn't require anyone's approval or comprehension to exist. This kind of departure is deceptively powerful. You move without announcing it, without dramatizing it, and without leaving breadcrumbs for others to chase. People may notice, they may speculate, they may even resist, but none of it touches you. Your energy is already gone from the space. What remains is clarity, integrity, and the silent authority that comes from choosing yourself over chaos, truth over pretense, and alignment over attachment. The act of leaving becomes a statement in itself, one that speaks volumes without a single word. You also notice the subtle ways this inevitability changes interactions leading up to departure. Nothing can provoke you, nothing can manipulate you. The pull of drama, expectation, or obligation has no hold. You exist in a zone where observation replaces reaction, detachment replaces frustration, and patience replaces impulse. Awareness turns leaving into an art form, executed with precision, without need for acknowledgement or justification. Ultimately, knowing everything removes the desire for closure. You don't need it because you already understand. Leaving without explanation is not coldness or avoidance, it's mastery. It's the quiet, unstoppable declaration that your life, your energy, and your truth cannot be contained by spaces or people that no longer serve your evolution. Departure becomes not an ending, but a statement of alignment, a release of what no longer belongs, and a preparation for what is waiting elsewhere, where presence is earned, not tolerated. It is inevitable, it is clean, and it is powerful. When you reach the level of awareness where truth is undeniable and clarity is absolute, life begins to reveal its hidden mechanics. You start seeing beyond the surface, the excuses, the facades, the performances, and the rituals that people call normal. You understand that proximity does not equal connection, that belonging is conditional, and that some bridges are never meant to be maintained. You realize that explaining yourself invites negotiation you're no longer willing to participate in, and that timing, energy, and alignment matter far more than being understood. Every interaction, every space, every relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting whether it serves your growth or feeds stagnation. At this point, departure is no longer dramatic. It's inevitable. Leaving quietly becomes the most honest, powerful, and strategic act you can take. It's not about pride, anger, or revenge. It's about protecting your integrity, preserving your energy, and honoring your truth. Walking away without explanation is not a weakness, it is mastery. It is a declaration that your presence will never be compromised, diluted, or wasted on environments, people, or situations that cannot rise to meet your clarity. Silence becomes a statement, absence becomes authority, and the world begins to bend around the power of your alignment. This is the level of awareness few ever reach. It is a space where knowledge frees you from the need for validation, where observation replaces reaction, and where leaving becomes not a loss, but a liberation. The more you see, the more you understand that life is not about convincing others or explaining yourself. It's about honoring your own evolution, trusting your own insight, and stepping into spaces that match the energy and truth you carry. If this message resonates with you, and you want more insights that sharpen your awareness and unlock the power of clarity, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button to show your support, drop a comment to share your thoughts and experiences, and don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs to see it. The journey toward understanding, alignment, and mastery is not meant to be silent. Let's grow together, and let the world witness the power of knowing. Stay blessed always.